The mountains above the Korangal Valley were still dark when the four-man Navy SEAL reconnaissance team stepped off the MH-47 and started climbing. The air was thin and cold, and the smell of dust and pine carried on the wind as they moved toward their overwatch point. Lieutenant Michael Murphy led the patrol, with gunner's mate Danny Dietz, sonar technician Matthew Axelson, and hospital corpsman Marcus Luttrell following in a spread formation. Their mission, Operation Red Wings, was designed to locate and track Ahmad Shah, a Taliban-aligned militia leader responsible for a string of attacks and murders across Kunar Province. Intelligence predicted a small cell of fighters, maybe 10 to 20, operating in the area. The team carried enough supplies for days of surveillance and enough ammunition to break contact if needed, but they were not prepared for the reality that waited in the ridgelines above them. The route was brutal. The slopes were steep, covered with loose rock and scrub oak, and every sound seemed to carry through the narrow valleys. The men reached their chosen hide site after dawn and dug in to observe a village where Shah's men were believed to be sheltering. Hours passed without movement. Heat built off the rocks, and the mountains around them remained quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt wrong in a place where Taliban fighters routinely moved between villages on foot. The team kept low, rotating watch and rationing their water as the sun climbed higher. Late in the morning, Dietz spotted movement along a goat trail cutting across the slope below. 3 civilian goat herders, an older man, a teenager, and a boy, walked straight into the team's position. The terrain offered no concealment and no time to move. In seconds, the SEALs were face-to-face with unarmed civilians who now knew their location. The rules of engagement were unambiguous. They could not harm non-combatants. Detaining them wasn't practical. The team had no way to secure or transport 3 civilians across miles of mountainous terrain. Releasing them meant risking compromise. Murphy made the call. The herders would live. The mission would continue. The herders left the ridge, disappearing down the slope. For nearly an hour, the team remained still, listening for any sign that their presence had been reported. The first indication came as a single distant shout, then another. Within minutes, scattered voices echoed from below, growing in number. The SEALs broke down their position, grabbed their gear, and began moving upward in hopes of gaining higher ground before they were surrounded. But the terrain worked against them. Sharp ridges and shelves of broken rock narrowed their path and slowed their climb. The first burst of gunfire came from the tree line, striking the rocks around them and kicking dust into the air. The team returned fire, bounding upward and trying to find cover. More fighters appeared along the slopes, dozens moving quickly, calling to one another as they climbed. Intelligence briefings had warned of a small group, but what the SEALs faced was a well-coordinated militia force with far more weapons and manpower than expected. Their radios struggled to hold signal, the valley walls killing the transmission. Dietz knelt behind a boulder, attempting to get a call out as rounds shattered the rock beside him. The fight turned into a running gun battle across the ridge. Axelson covered Dietz while Murphy and Luttrell shifted positions to prevent the fighters from flanking them. The volume of fire grew heavier. Grenades detonated along the rocks, filling the air with dust and shards of shale. Dietz was hit multiple times, but he stayed in the fight, firing until blood from his wounds soaked through the straps of his gear. Murphy took a grazing hit across the abdomen, yet kept moving. Axelson held the high side, picking off fighters attempting to reach the upper ridge. With their radios failing, Murphy knew they needed open ground to reach the operations center. He broke cover and moved downhill toward a small clearing fully exposed to enemy fire. Bullets snapped past him as he knelt, keyed the radio, and transmitted their coordinates and situation. The call cut in and out, but it was enough. The quick reaction force began to mobilize. As Murphy made his way back toward cover, he was hit again. He collapsed behind a rock, still calling out directions between waves of pain. Minutes later, he was struck a final time. Dietz fell after being hit again and again, unable to continue under the weight of his injuries. Axelson, wounded badly, continued fighting from a separate spur after the team was separated during a fall down the slope. He kept firing until his rifle was destroyed and his position overrun. Luttrell, thrown down the mountainside by a grenade blast, survived with broken bones, burns, and shrapnel wounds. He crawled into a ravine and hid while Shah's fighters searched the hillside. For hours he dragged himself through brush and rock, moving only when the sound of footsteps faded. Meanwhile, the Quick Reaction Force launched from Jalalabad aboard Turbine 33, a Chinook carrying 8 SEALs and 8 Army Night Stalkers. As the helicopter approached the valley, a Taliban fighter fired a rocket-propelled grenade from a ridgeline. The round struck the aircraft's rotor hub. The helicopter spiraled into the mountain, killing everyone on board. It was the deadliest single day in naval special warfare since World War II. Luttrell was found by Gulab, a Pashtun villager whose community followed the ancient code of Pashtunwali. Gulab sheltered him, protected him from the fighters searching the village, and risked retaliation to keep him alive. Over the following days, Luttrell was moved between homes and hidden paths while American forces searched the region. A local elder eventually made contact with U.S. troops, leading to Luttrell's rescue nearly a week after the firefight. In the aftermath, investigations revealed that the number of fighters supporting Ahmad Shah had been underestimated. Intelligence reports warning of increased movement in the area had not been weighed heavily enough. Communications equipment, tested in controlled environments, failed under the terrain constraints of the Korangal. The decision to deploy a 4-man reconnaissance team into a region known for heavy insurgent presence was examined in detail. Every factor contributed to a mission that spiraled beyond the scope of what the team had been equipped to handle. Operation Red Wings became widely known through books and film, but the real events were more chaotic, more desperate, and more costly than most public versions presented. The men of the recon team fought against staggering odds in terrain that neutralized their communications and support advantages. The rescuers who launched to save them faced their own impossible risks. And the villagers who protected Luttrell acted under a code older than any modern conflict. The story of Operation Red Wings is remembered not only for the lone survivor, but for the men who fought beside him, the rescuers who never returned, and the civilians who upheld their duty regardless of the danger around them. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.